Welcome back to Tanya in Lesson 5. Today, we recap Chapter 5. Chapter 5 concludes the discussion on the godly soul's nature and experience. In Chapter 2, we established the divine essence, the godly spark within every Jew. In Chapter 3, we talked about the godly soul's personality and his experience, his understanding of God, his feelings for God. In Chapter 4, we discussed the way in which the godly soul expresses his feelings for God by fulfilling God's desire in the study of Torah and the speaking the words of Torah and the actions of fulfilling God's commandments, the mitzvahs. And then in Chapter 5, we add one more unique element within the godly soul's experience, specifically related to the study of Torah. When a person studies and understands Torah, three things happen. Number one, while I am studying Torah, my mind is completely fully invested in that Torah study. Whatever it is I'm trying to understand, whether it's a passage from the Talmud, whether it's a Mishnah, whether it's a Chumash with some commentary, when I am engaged in trying to understand Torah, I am invested in Torah. This is the same thing as we discussed in Chapter 4 with mitzvahs. When I am doing a mitzvah, I am invested in the divine act of the fulfilling the mitzvah. When I study Torah, I am invested in trying to understand the divine word. But then there are two other elements to the study of Torah, which is unique and that does not exist with mitzvahs. Number one, when I understand any part of Torah, now that Torah information, that divine wisdom, the godly idea, whatever I happen to be studying in Torah is godly ideas. That godly idea is now inside of me. It's in my mind. So in addition to the fact that when I study Torah, I'm invested in the godly idea, just like when I do mitzvahs, I'm invested in the godly act. Once I understand the godly idea, now that godly idea is in me. It's in my mind. My mind envelops that idea. Stage number one. Number two is with some time, and with the more I study Torah, not only is there some information stored somewhere in some file cabinet in the back of my mind with all these godly ideas, but actually those godly ideas start to shape the way I think. It becomes part of my thought process. Torah, divine wisdom, becomes part of my thought process. This is the same thing as the way we consume food. The first thing is, I consume it, I put it into me. And then, as the body processes that food, it becomes part of my physical body. The same thing is true of the way we consume divine information. Number one, the divine information is inside of me. The godly idea, the godly wisdom, whatever part of Torah I'm learning is now in me. And then, as my mind processes that information, and as I learn more of that information, it starts to get incorporated into the way I think. It becomes part of my actual thought process. The takeaway from all of this is that the study of Torah is valuable in and of itself, even if it leads to no practical solution or no practical action. In fact, there are many parts of Torah study that will have no practical ramification on one's life. And yet, it is valuable in that the moment I study that godly idea, that part of Torah, I am engaged in divine wisdom. And then when I understand that divine wisdom becomes part of me, goes into me, becomes part of my thought process, and this is a oneness that I can achieve with God like no other. It's a direct quote from the Alter Rebbe. A union like no other, where I become one with it because I am invested in the study, and it becomes one with me because those ideas are now in my mind and part of the way I think. Now in the next chapters, chapter 6, 7, and 8, the Alter Rebbe is going to dedicate to spending more detail on the animal soul's experience and its world. The godly soul's experience is its feelings for God, its godly essence, and then its behavior for God, and then it's studying God's ideas. That's the godly soul's experience and world. And then in chapter 6, 7, and 8, we're going to get to the animal soul's experience and its world. And then finally in chapter 9, we're going to get to the struggle between the godly soul and the animal soul. Remember to keep in mind that until we get to chapter 14, the Alter Rebbe is defining the terms. right? So he's first defining the godly soul, then the animal soul, then the struggle, and then finally how we can achieve within that struggle. Looking forward to seeing you at the end of Chapter 6.